Whether the team is giving us the highest of highs or the bluest of blues, we'll cover it all here on Commanders Nightly News. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So, Joe Whitt Jr., lot of questions, not a ton of answers after last week's debacle versus the Atlanta Falcons on the road. I was really looking forward to his press conference today. One of the things I was looking to see was what were some of the answers to some of the things that we saw on the field. I was wondering if he was going to take accountability, something he has done in the past quite often, right? A lot of times he falls on the grenade. He is the one that bites the bullet and says, I have to be better. It's my job to make sure that these guys are better. That is not what Joe Whitt Jr. did at this press conference. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't blame him. I would not have taken blame and accountability for this, especially if I feel like these were things that we talked about and you guys did not execute. I'm not going to fall on the shield for you guys repeatedly, because as a wise man once said, if you keep telling people that it's your fault, eventually they're going to start to believe you. And again, look, Joe Whitt Jr. doesn't need to tell anybody that this is his fault. He's getting blamed anyway. Okay. 90% of the fan base thinks that this guy stinks, and at least 70 of that 90 believe he should be fired. Okay. So at this point, he doesn't need to take the blame for anything. He's already getting it. And for the people like myself who think he needs to be better, but I know better, and I've told you this, and if you watch the film, shout out to the mob and those who are Patreon supporters, I've told you guys, and I've said it on this program as well, the communication last week was the worst I've ever seen from a Joe Whitt Jr. coached defense here in Washington. Dan Quinn, etc. Since they've been here, that was the worst communication that I've seen. And one of the talking points for Joe Whitt was communication pre and post snap. Again, we'll get to what he said at the podium, but I did feel like it was interesting that he didn't point any fingers particularly at anybody, but if you watched the film, you knew who he was talking about in certain instances, right? But ultimately, he did talk about instances where guys didn't do their jobs. Plays were set up for them to be in the right position. They knew what was coming, and they just didn't play it well. They didn't do their job. He said they were putting on a cape, and I think that does come with the idea of trying to create turnovers. So we'll see what this defense ultimately looks like in week 5. He said that this defense, he vowed that this defense would be better. And you got to understand who I am and what my thought process is. I don't think like a lot of you. A lot of you think that Joe Whitt stinks, this defense is trash, and we can't win with this defense as it's constructed. I don't believe that. And I've said that numerous times. So you got to understand, I don't think like most of you. We're not in the same, wavelength, and our thought process isn't the same when it comes to this defense. I'm not telling you that this defense is a bona fide beast. I'm not telling you we got a lot of work to do, but we're in year 2 of a recalibration. I'm a realist. I understand where this roster is. My point has been and continues to be, this roster is way better than it was last year. The biggest issue that we've run into this year is that we haven't been healthy. It all started with Terry McLaurin and the holdout. I hated it all summer. I talked about it. I said it's going to have an impact on this team, and it has. Terry isn't healthy right now. There has been no continuity. Guys have been in and out of the lineup. We've got massive injuries, etc., etc. The bottom line is this is still a better football team than it was a year ago. This is a much better defense than it was a year ago, and they've already shown that. They've already shown that they're better. Last week's performance was really bad. Sometimes you have really bad games. I'm not telling you that they haven't shown the propensity to be bad this season, because that's the second time they were bad. They weren't as bad in week 2 against the Packers. They were awful against the Falcons last week. Just putrid. But that doesn't mean they can't get better. I expect them to get better. I expect the team, the defense, the offense for that matter, to get better, to be more consistent as this season goes along. That's what happens during the course of an NFL season. You get better. As DQ said last year, you don't expect your week 1 team to beat your week 5 team. You don't expect your week 5 team to beat your week 9 team. Your week 9 team shouldn't beat your week 16 team. I don't expect this team to get worse as the season progresses. I expect them to get better. Now, this whole notion that the turnovers will come, I don't know about that, but we'll get into that. But I'll just say this. Joe Whitt Jr. at his press conference today took no accountability for the performance against Atlanta. And while I don't think some of the questions asked put him in a position to have to take accountability, which it's not the media's job to point the finger at Joe Whitt Jr. That's not their job. Their job is to figure out what went wrong, why it went wrong, and how do you fix it. They asked the questions that needed to be asked for the most part. He didn't address the 3rd and 2. I would have loved someone to just say, hey, Joe, I just was curious. What happened on that 3rd and 2 with the Bijan Robinson catch when there was no one within 10 yards of him? And he probably would have told him, like, yeah, we had some guys out of position there. The communication was off, etc. I just wanted to know. We never found out what happened there, but that's nor here nor there. That's water under the bridge. At the end of the day, Joe Whitt Jr., he struggled at, I thought, putting guys in the best positions to succeed on Sunday. And maybe in certain coverages and certain opportunities, he put guys in the right position and they didn't execute. But I'm pretty sure he was responsible for Jacob Martin dropping into coverage, Dorrance Armstrong dropping into coverage, Bobby Wagner, coming around on a long-ass stunt, looping inside. I'm pretty sure he was responsible for those things taking place. And those things, to me, are negligent behavior when you're talking about this defense. We don't have a lot of guys that can get to the quarterback. Those are 2 of your best pass rushers right now. They can't be dropping into coverage. So, again, he was partly responsible for the debacle that was Sunday's performance, but the communication was really bad. And the players have to take ownership of that. And if I'm Joe Whitt Jr., I'm not going to keep telling y'all it's my fault, it's my fault, it's my fault, because eventually you're going to go, yep, you know what? It is your damn fault. And you need to be held responsible. So ultimately, he took no accountability. I don't blame him because of all the heat that he's already taking. But he said this defense is going to be better. He vows that it's going to be better. And he says it starts on Sunday versus the Chargers. Let's see if he's right. If he's not, the noise will only get louder for Joe Whitt Jr. But he said some things that resonated with me at his press conference. We're going to talk about those things when we get to his press conference today. We heard from both he and Cliff Kingsbury today. It was Coordinator Thursday. So let's transition to in other news, where we're going to talk about what was said at the podium. But before we do that, we've got an injury report to attack for both teams heading into the Week 5 contest. So let's see what it looks like for both teams on Thursday, starting with the good guys. And remember, this thing was robust yesterday. It's been condensed a little bit today. Some of those non-injury related guys that get that vet rest day on Wednesday have been removed. It's still a pretty lengthy list, but I think we have much more clarity on this thing today than we did yesterday. So I feel a lot better about the list today than I did yesterday, which is usually the case on Wednesday, because you don't know if that's just them trying to give a guy an extra day of rest or if that guy is really actually banged up. We got our answer today, so let's talk about it. Dorrance Armstrong missed practice with an illness yesterday, was back in a full capacity today. As I told you yesterday, that didn't really strike me as anything we needed to be concerned about. We got our answer today. He got on that team plane today. We're all good there. Nick Bellore, full participant after taking a vet rest day. I don't even know why he's on this report, maybe because he still had a quad. But nonetheless, it said NIR. he should have been removed with the rest of the guys like Laramie Tunzel and Zach Ertz and Von Miller that were up here yesterday. He should have been removed as well, but nonetheless, he's good to go. Noah Brown did not practice again today, but good news, he and Terry McLaurin were both seen on the side field stretching with the team initially, and then on the side field getting work in. So that is a great sign. I told you next week is the game I have circled. You get an extra day of rest and recovery and preparation. That's the day I have circled for guys like Noah Brown and Terry McLaurin. Maybe a Monday night isn't a great time to play them because it's a quick turnaround. They don't get a full week of recovery. And maybe week 7 against Dallas is more ideal for those guys to come back. I don't know. But I've got week 6 against the Chicago Bears on a Monday night circled for Terry McLaurin, Noah Brown, and company. And so Noah Brown did not practice. Terry McLaurin did not practice. Both already ruled out. Same can be said for Sam Cosmi, who had his 21-day window opened yesterday. He's practicing in full, but they're ramping him up. I told you that I have him pegged for week 7 against Dallas, but I would love it if he would be ready for week 6 as well. I still feel like he's week 7 bound. We'll see what happens with Sam Cosmi, but those 3 guys did not get on the plane to LA. Remember, the team left after practice today, got on the plane to go to LA so they could get there early, allow their bodies to adjust, and they're going to get a practice session in tomorrow and a walkthrough on Saturday out in LA to get more acclimated to their environment. So those 3 are out. Everybody else on this list got on the plane, and that is a great sign. If you're not going to play, if they already have made a determination on your status for Sunday, you're not going to be in attendance at this game. You're not going to get on the plane. There's no reason for you to be on that plane. So the fact that Ale Cajo, who we weren't sure was going to be able to pass concussion protocol based off of the hit that he delivered but got the worst of on Sunday versus the Falcons, he practiced on a limited basis on Thursday. His status still up in the air. There's no guarantee that he plays, but the fact that he was able to practice even in a limited capacity bodes well for him being available come Sunday. Mike Sainristil did not practice today, much like Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown, seen on the side field getting in work. Again, good sign that they were out there. It's always a bad sign when the media doesn't see these guys at all, right? The closer you are to playing, the more visible you are. The less visible you are when you hear no mention of, or you hear, haven't seen Terry McLaurin, that means he's further away from getting back on the field. The fact that Mike Sainristil and Deebo Samuel both were out there today, even though they did not practice, and they both got on the plane to LA, makes me feel like both of them are going to play. But those are real injuries, okay? Those aren't fake injuries. Those are both real injuries that those guys are nursing, much like Bill maybe last week. I think those guys are DMPs Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I think those guys both practice tomorrow, and I expect both of them to play on Sunday. Percy Butler limited both Wednesday and Thursday. I'm still not sure if he's going to play on Sunday, but he got on that plane. That's the most important part. If I had to bet, if I were a betting man, which I am, I would say he's going to play this weekend as well. And then you have all the guys that are definitely playing, barring a setback. John Bates, full yesterday, full again today. Jaden Daniels, full yesterday, full again today. And Colson Yankoff, full today. All, to me, going to play on Sunday. All of these guys, to me, look like guys that we can go ahead and pencil in as starters, or in the case of Colson Yankoff, guys, he's a starter on special teams, guys that we can count on to play on Sunday versus the Rams. So this thing is tightened up for me. The only guys that are definitely out are the guys that already have out designations who didn't even get on the plane today. And I think everybody else that is up here is going to play on Sunday. That's where my mind is. Until otherwise notified, Mikey Sainristil, Deebo Samuel, Percy Butler, all of these guys are going to play. Ale Cajo, all of them are going to play, if you ask me. So I'm not too concerned by this injury report. I will be more concerned if Mikey Sainristil and Deebo Samuel don't practice tomorrow and then they're listed as questionable. I'll be nervous then, right? But even if they're limited tomorrow and then questionable, I'll feel much better about that. So right now, in my mind, everybody's playing. Everybody that is not officially ruled out of this game is playing on Sunday until I get notified that is in fact not the case. You go to the ops, and this looks a lot like yesterday. Keenan Allen full today. I already told you guys he was going to play, so there was really nothing to see there. Joe Alt, I already told you, is out of this game. So I don't know what the Chargers are waiting on, why they haven't already ruled him out, why they haven't. I think they should just put him on IR, personally, but whatever. That's not my problem. He's not playing in this game. Mekhi Becton limited again with the concussion. Going to keep my eye on that. That's another big name that I would love for them to not have in this game. That will also help us on the interior of that offensive line if he can't go. Darius Davis feels like he's trending towards not going. That's a big one because he's their punt returner, and he's a damn good one. So, and a guy that can, take the top off the defense. Not that they throw him the football a ton, but still, with the way we give up big explosives, just one less guy that can stretch the field vertically is a good sign for us. So I'm more concerned with him as a punt returner, and if he can't go, that's a big thing for the Commanders. Will Dissly, limited with the knee. He's a really good blocking tight end, can catch it out of the backfield, but his calling card, similar to John Bates, is blocking. So if he can't go, that'll hurt them in the run game. Tucker Fisk was just added, another big physical. I mean, this dude's like 300 pounds at the tight end position. Like, he's a big monster. So he's been added, limited with the toe. I expect him to be able to go. Andre James was good yesterday, good again today, so expect him to be available. Derwin James and Talib Still, I talked about, these are two guys that are essential to the success of a top 5 pass defense in the league right now for the Los Angeles Chargers. Both of these guys are going to play. They were both limited yesterday, both limited again today. These guys are going to play on Sunday. So don't look for any advantages in the secondary with Derwin James or Talib Still being out. So let's get to what was said at the press conference, and let's start with your main man, Joe Whitt Jr. So Joe Whitt Jr. started out today with his press conference talking about inconsistency, and he said that the thing that really bothers him right now is the lack of consistency by the defense. To this point, he said the consistency has been off. Guys are doing too much, and they're not doing their job. So he talked about some things that have stood out to him. And the first thing he talked about was communication, that the communication was off on Sunday. It was not good. I talked about that as one of the things that was really jarring for me watching the film. The communication was the worst I've seen it under Joe Whitt Jr. and Dan Quinn. He then, went on to say, and he said this at least 7 to 10 times in this press conference, don't put the cape on. You don't have to be a superhero. Just do your job. You hear that a lot of times when you get breakdowns on defense, when big plays happen, you get somebody's eyes in the wrong place, trying to do too much, looking to make a play. I honestly think that's the problem right now, is everybody wants to be the guy to make a play, because I think they're harping on getting turnovers. Because I've seen, and I'm pretty sure you have as well, if you've watched the game over multiple times, I know you've seen guys going for the football, looking to punch it out, even though they're missing tackles to do so, which is not what they advocate that these guys do. They want them to secure the tackle first, and then the next guy come in and punch the ball out, which rarely works. It's usually the first guy that comes to the ball carrier punches it out. But whatever. You see guys actively trying to punch the ball out. They're just missing tackles while trying to do it, and they're not punching the ball out. So clearly they're harping on getting turnovers, and I think you're seeing guys not be disciplined in their approach defensively in coverage because they want to be the guy to jump a route. They want to be the guy to take it away, and they're not doing their job. And I can see it. Like, and I told y'all about the first play of the game. Did I not? Did I not explain that to y'all on yesterday's show about the first play of the game and who was out of position? And Joe Whitt Jr. literally explained that first play. He said, we drew it up. We knew they were going to go to it. We talked about it, and we got the play, and we still didn't execute. And he said, one guy, went rogue, trying to be a hero, and he said, that's not your play to make. And so he then talked about tackling. And he said, last week against the Raiders, or, in week 3 against the Raiders, we had all these turnbacks. And he talked about, turnbacks are when a guy gets the ball and he turns his back, turns all the way around towards, he has to be turned around, or he gets turned around by the defense towards his own end zone, right? So it means his back is turned to the defense in some way, shape, or form. He's like, we had pretty much none of those this week. And obviously we missed a shit ton of tackles, which he also harped on, like, guys have to do a better job of tackling, which I talked about, that this was the worst exhibition of tackling that I've seen from Joe Whitt and Dan Quinn here in Washington as well. So the communication was the worst I saw. The tackling was the worst I saw. And then he talked about pre and post snap communication and how vital that is. And he talked about the essential nature of pre and post snap communication. And he went back to week 1 with the communication and some good examples of it and when it works and what it's supposed to look like when guys execute it. But he also brought that up, and he talked about guys like Will Harris, who's no longer a part of this defense because of his injury. So it makes me think, like, who's going to step up? Who's going to be the guy that stops the bleeding? Who's going to be the guy that communicates to get everyone lined up to make sure that the calls are being, disseminated to everyone? Everyone's on the same page and guys are doing their job, because I feel like Will Harris was one of those underrated glue guys. And, I talked about that last night. And to a greater extent, you had Candy Waller on the show. I had Candy Waller on the show with me for Candy Wednesdays, Seawall Wednesdays. And she talked about the unsung hero that Will Harris was, and that his absence is being felt. A lot of people really didn't think about him in that way, but I didn't acknowledge it until after watching the performance. Like, somebody had brought up on Sunday after the game that Will Harris's absence may be felt a little bit more than we may have let on. And I was like, I don't know about all of that. And then I watched the film and I'm like, maybe we really, truly do miss Will Harris. Maybe that is a real thing. And Joe Whitt kind of, hinted at that. He didn't necessarily spell it out, but he threw out some, things that make you think that, hey, we definitely are missing Will Harris. I know we're going to miss him in coverage. I do know that. I would have felt a lot better with him being out there, going against the Falcons and Kyle Pitts and things of that nature than, Jeremy Chin or Jeremy Reeves, excuse me, and what we're going to be putting out there. So he talked about forcing turnovers. He said you can't force the issue. He feels like part of the reason for the miscommunication is guys want to force turnovers. And I can sense that. I can feel that. I can see that. But ultimately, I'd much rather, because we're not forcing the turnovers any damn way. So I'd much rather them get off the field on third downs like they were the first 3 weeks of the season and not force any turnovers than try to force turnovers, still don't force any, and now you're giving up 50% on third downs. And you're giving up massive chunk plays on second down. I'd much rather you just stay disciplined and sound in your approach and just not get turnovers. So you gotta pick a struggle, essentially. You can't force the issue trying to get turnovers, still don't get them, and now you're not doing the thing that you were doing before, which is getting stops on third down. You got to pick a struggle. he talked about Frankie Louvu, and he basically said Frankie was the best player defensively on the field. He was the only guy that did his job at a high level on Sunday. Remember, I told you guys Frankie Louvu had his best game of the season, and it wasn't close. He was everywhere. He missed a couple of tackles that he could have had for a loss, but for the most part, he was everywhere on Sunday. He talked about pressure and the inconsistent nature of it, and he basically said, like, he didn't acknowledge that the pressure wasn't good enough on Sunday. So it kind of felt like he was capping a little bit with his conversations around pressure. He made it seem like, we did a good job of pressuring Michael Penix. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Really, we had pressure in weeks 1 and 3. We didn't have pressure in weeks 2 and 4. He did acknowledge that the pressure can be a little bit more consistent, but overall, he's been pleased with what they've done up front. He's like, we got the guys to do it. I believe you got the guys to be consistent in applying pressure, but you got to utilize them correctly. And you got to mix some things up. And so you got to have the right guys attacking the line of scrimmage. He talked about fast starts, and he went back to the Falcons game and back to the first possession. And I couldn't help but agree with him on this. The first possession played out exactly the way we wanted to. You get a Bijan Robinson run, which they probably got a little bit more than you would have liked them to. I think he got like 5, maybe 6, 4 or 5 on that first run. Then they go to throw the ball to Ray McCloud. He drops it. So you end up in a 3rd and maybe 5 or 6, and you got a chance to get off the field. And one guy didn't do his job, and it led to Kyle Pitts being wide as open. And so ultimately, if that guy does his job, and he said, we went over that play, we knew we were going to get that play. The Falcons ran that concept at least 5 or 6 times in the game. So he was right. They went over that play. They knew they were going to get that play repeatedly. They did get that play over and over again. And then they blew coverage when it came. And he said, instead of it being a 3 and out, you get the stop, you get off the field, it's massive gain. And now they got all the momentum from the big play, right? And he said that's the difference between getting off to a fast start and not. And I can see that. He talked about Bobby being on Bijan Robinson out of the backfield, and he said, look, he said, we try to keep Bobby out of these situations as much as possible, which he said this is why we blitz Bobby so often. So he's not put in positions where he has to cover the backs or the tight ends. But every so often, we're not able to get him out of there, and, got to be better. He's like, we don't want Bobby on speed backs. We consider Bijan Robinson a speed back. So ideally, we would like him to not be in that situation, but it happened. I would also challenge you on not putting him on athletic tight ends either. But he ultimately said, Bobby is a really good player, a guy that we expect to be able to get, whatever assignment we give him done. And he had to fight through traffic on that one. And, we tried to take the air out of the ball. These are all things he talked about, but ultimately Bobby got cooked on that play. You can tell us this, that, or third, but Bobby got cooked on the play. And to his point, they do try to keep Bobby out of those situations, but it's going to be impossible to keep him out of those situations, because one of these times you're going to play man, Bobby's going to be matched up with a running back or a tight end, and he's going to get beat. And instead of putting him in those positions, I continue to contend, find somebody else to do it or take Bobby off the field, right? And I'm not advocating for Bobby to be off the field, 50% of the snaps. That's not me at all. I said Bobby can still play 90, 95% of the snaps. But, every so often, you're playing a little bit of man, get Bobby off the field. Adjustments in game. He talked about not waiting until the game is over, coming down, making some adjustments at halftime. He said they did that in this game. Obviously, those adjustments did not work because the Falcons were just as successful in the second half as they were in the first half. When when we got a score, they got a score. If I can't think of too many times where we got stops in the game. So every time we scored, they scored. That's what it felt like. And so we never really we never saw any real adjustments made in this game. Not to me, at least. He said that these players can't over try. Takeaways will happen. You can't over try looking to force turnovers, interceptions, forced fumbles, etc. You have to play the defense as it's called. And he said, look, interceptions usually come from tips, overthrows, and mistakes, right? Bad throws in some way, shape, or form. Like, he's like, rarely are you just going to jump a route. Like, so just play the defense the way it's intended for you to play. And if you're in the right place at the right time, good things will happen. But you can't over try. You can't put your cape on and try to do somebody else's job, and then your job doesn't get done and a big play happens. He said, and this was my favorite part of the press conference, because I totally agree with him 100%. He said he's happy with the run defense right now, as am I. And I've told you guys that. I said the one thing that I feel like I can hang my hat on, and I said this since week 1, I could tell, we're going to be able to stop the run. He said he's not happy with the explosives that they've given up, which no one is. And I went through numbers with you guys yesterday. Or was it Tuesday? One of the 2 days. I went through numbers with you. I think it was Tuesday. And I basically said the biggest difference between us and some other defenses that we think are really good in the league right now, Philadelphia and Detroit and some other teams, is they're not giving up big plays like we are. Those teams we had this a pretty similar completion percentage given up in terms of passes completed when they're throwing the ball to receivers, backs, tight ends, etc. We're doing a really good job. We're better than those teams that I just mentioned in third down defense. We were number 1 going into the game last week. We were doing a lot of good things. We were top 10 rush defense. We were top 7 rush defense going into the game last week. We were doing a lot of good things. The biggest problem, and I showed you, we were dead last in yards per completion. That means we're giving up too many chunk plays. And that is our biggest issue to date. And that's what Joe Whitt Jr. spoke to. He said, look, the way that we've played defense thus far, if you take away the chunk plays, and which you can't, they've happened, but he said, we're going to be better. And I believe they can be better, because if they communicate better, I think they will be better, right? He said, we'll be better. But if you take away those chunk plays, he said, we're a good defense. I believe that. You know how many times we have teams in 2nd and 17 and 16? The problem is we're liable to give up 20 on 2nd and 16. We're liable to give up 15 on 2nd and 16. Or 2nd and 17 and we give up 40. But he said, if you take away the explosives and then you start creating turnovers, we're an elite defense. I believe that too. Because again, we're already top 7 in third down defense. We were just number 1. I feel like you already stopped the run at a high level. If you can start getting consistent pressure on the quarterback, and I don't know if that's going to take place or not, he's got to help with that. They aren't good enough up front to just rush and beat guys. We're not the Giants. We're not the Broncos defensively. You're not just going to get pressure rushing 4 with guys just winning one-on-one matchups. You're going to have to create opportunities for guys to win. And so I don't ever see this defense being elite, even if we start to create turnovers and we curtail the amount of elite, explosive plays. But I could see this being a formidable defense, one that you can win games with. I didn't see that last year. I never saw that for us last year. The goal last year was offense, just keep the defense off the field as much as possible. They don't have to do that this year, but it would be nice if they did their job. And we're going to talk about that because Cliff, I thought, had a great line today. Matter of fact, let's transition to Cliff's press conference. Cliff said he talked about Jalen Lane and Luke McCaffrey's growth, and he really just said, look, they're getting opportunities. That was the biggest thing. They really weren't getting a ton of opportunities. Now they're getting opportunities, and they're taking advantage of it. He said, us in the building, we've seen their growth. We knew what they were capable of. Now everyone else is seeing it because they've gotten an opportunity to play. He talked about complementary football. To me, this was the best quote of the day from Cliff. He basically said, we're not playing complementary football as a team right now. He said the biggest problem we're having is that one unit is doing something, but then the other unit isn't doing it, or the other unit. He's like, the defense goes out and gets a stop, and then we go 3 and out. Speaking of the offense, he said the offense goes down and scores, and then the defense gives up a touchdown or gives up a score. He's like, the special teams gets a great return, and then the offense doesn't do anything with it or doesn't take full advantage of it. And he said that's the issue right now. And he's so right. We've had those conversations, but he's so spot on. Like, that's the biggest problem right now is the lack of complementary football. But I got to put it under one big umbrella. And I told you guys this, and I said this on Bleacher Report this week. The biggest reason why we're 2-2 right now is inconsistency. And you can look at that so many ways. You can break that into subcategories, but we've been so inconsistent this season. And one of the things we've been inconsistent with is sustaining offense, which is why we only convert 33% on third downs right now. We've been inconsistent from a health perspective, inconsistent with penalties, inconsistent with tackling, inconsistent with pass rush, inconsistent with pass defense. We've been inconsistent sustaining offense. We've been inconsistent defensively. Like, you can just kind of look at the way this team is going, and it's up and down, up and down. And he said you can't ride that wave. Like, Cliff's like, you can't do the up and down thing. We got to straighten this shit out. And we got to be consistent. And he talked about having John Bates back. And he was like, they asked Trent Scott to be essentially John Bates, for, lack of a better way to put it. They were putting him in situations where they knew they wanted to either drop back on play action and take a shot down the field and they need extra time, or they knew they were trying to run it. They would just put Trent Scott in there because John Bates is like an extra lineman. And he said having Bates back is a big get for this offense. But the guys that were in there stepped up, did their jobs, and gave them a chance to continue to be successful, which we were. Like, we ran for over 200 against the Raiders. We had a really good day running the football again. Cliff probably should have run it more. We averaged almost 7 yards a carry against Atlanta in the game on Sunday. Like, we ran the football effectively again. Obviously, the Chris Rodriguez 48-yard run really spikes the number, but shit, every touch Bill had almost went for 7 yards. He averaged damn near 7 yards a carry. I think he had 7 carries for 47 or 48 yards. So that's right on the cusp of 7 a pop. So, like, literally, we were running for almost 7 yards a touch on the ground. So Bates adds to that, and it's going to be good to have him back. I think we're going to really – he helps so much in the run game, but he also is such a good pass protector. Like, the Kosen Yankov holding penalty that negated like a 35, 40-yard Jalen Lane catch on the sidelines. Like, that's the kind of shit you don't have when John Bates is in the lineup, right? You don't have to worry about that. He talked about Jaden being Jaden and them not having to protect him. He said that's why we had him sit out 2 weeks, so he could come back with no limitations. Full playbook is open, which translation for all of you who are still spooked by the injury, he shouldn't be playing. If you're wearing a knee brace, you shouldn't be playing. All that whole crowd. Cliff pretty much said, pipe down. If he couldn't go, we wouldn't put him out there. We didn't think he was 100%. We didn't think he was ready to go. That's why we were, precautious with him. He probably could have played last week. And if it was a playoff game, he probably would have played last week and the week before that. But it wasn't. So they could take their time with this, let him heal up. He's healthy. Yeah, he's wearing a knee brace, but that's just for stability purposes, right? Rather be safe than sorry. He probably could play without it, but why? Why even put that risk out there? They said they're not going to protect him, though. They are. He is going to, be conscious of Jaden being out there, and there are going to be calls that they make to try to, limit the amount of times he runs, but they're going to still use him as a runner is what it sounds like to me. They're still going to use him as a guy that you have to contend with out there and his legs. So for those of you looking for them to scale it back, I wouldn't hold my breath. He talked about Jaden being back and his impact, but he really took that opportunity to talk about Marcus Mariota and the love that they have for Marcus and the job that he did. He said Marcus pretty much in the 4 games he's played has done just about everything you could ask a backup quarterback to come in and do. He's been fantastic. So, we love what Marcus, brings to the table and what he is able to provide us. But he's like, Jaden is a transcendent talent. He's like, Jaden is one of these guys that comes along every once so often. He's a generational talent. So, yeah, he changes the game when you get him back out there. And so he's like, he has tremendous impact on this offense. And then he talked about the running back room, and he talked about the confidence that he has in every single guy in that running back room. Now, he said that all of them are running well, which they are. He highlighted J-Mac's run against the Raiders and talked about C-Rod having a nice run in the game against the Falcons. But ultimately, he's like, we love what these backs are doing. We're going to continue to go in the direction that we're going. So translation, don't look for Bill to have this massive uptick in touches yet. But he said eventually, we'll see if someone gets the hot hand or if somebody starts to assert themselves a little bit more as the season progresses. I'm thinking he's talking about Bill. Pass protection, he talked about Bill getting better in that regard, but he did give up a pressure on Sunday. At the end of the day, I think you're going to see this running back by committee continue to go how it's been. C-Rod's going to continue to start games, get a lot of the early work. Then you'll see Bill work his way in, get about 2-3 straight possessions. Then you're going to see them mix in some J-Mac. C-Rod's going to get back in there, and then you're going to see Bill again. So I just want Bill to lead the team in every single game moving forward in rushes. Not sure if that's going to happen in this upcoming game versus the Chargers or not, but that's what I would love to see. And so that was your 2 pressers from today. You get to the next order of business, and that's behind enemy lines. Before we do that, however, we are going to get a word from one of our sponsors, come back on the other side, and we will go behind enemy lines. Sleeper is the best way to experience and connect over sports together. It's a one-stop shop for all of your sports needs. You can celebrate and chat in the games in real time with other users, get the fastest scores, blazing fast news and alerts right at your fingertips. Play in fantasy leagues and win real money on picks contests. So enjoy sports the way they were meant to, together. Download the #1 sports app today. Predict the hottest football stats like passing yards, receiving yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and much more to cash in on your daily fantasy football skills. Use promo code LTN, and Sleeper will match your first deposit up to $100. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. Sleeper. So, we go behind enemy lines, and the Commanders are a 2.5-point underdog in this game. And I don't think many people expect us to go in here and win this game. And I don't blame them, right? The showing on Sunday was abysmal defensively. The Chargers are a better team than the Atlanta Falcons are. Herbert's been playing, a little up and down here of late. Like, he started off like gangbusters, like he would be in the MVP conversation after the first 2 weeks against the Chiefs and Raiders. And then the last 2 weeks, he's seen some really good defenses in the Denver Broncos and the New York Giants, and his play has come down. And I think that's also been in conjunction with the injuries that have happened to their offensive line. So you've seen a uptick in his turnovers, a downturn in his consistency, but we're not the Broncos and we're not the Giants defensively. And thus, this could easily be a get-right game for Justin Herbert in this Chargers offense. They could get back on track, and they could start playing good football again in week 5 if this defense doesn't come out and play better. I also think it is the responsibility of the offense to take pressure off of this defense by sustaining itself, something we really haven't done all season. We have yet to have seen the real Commanders offense stand up and be in attendance in one of these games. Even when we were able to absolutely trounce the Raiders, we still didn't do the things that we felt like we could have. We could have scored 50 in that game, right? We still haven't unleashed holy hell on anyone quite yet. And honestly, I'm not even looking for a 40 burger or anything crazy against the Chargers. I'm just looking for this offense to be consistent. I think if the offense is consistent, it's a trickle-down effect to the rest of the team. That's what I feel. So let's take a look at where these two teams are right now. We're going to start with Washington, go through their statistics quickly, and then we'll really hammer things home when we talk about the Chargers. So right now, the Commanders are 12th in total offense. They're 8th in scoring offense. They're 25th in passing offense. They're 21st in sacks allowed. So the passing offense has really suffered because there's no Jaden. Marcus has been in, and not that Marcus hasn't done a really good job, but the skill position guys aren't the best right now. They've had an emphasis on the run to a degree, but this has really been impacted by the fact that we just haven't sustained offense. I think the passing offense is directly correlated to the third down offense, which is directly correlated to the time of possession, right? So I think those three things have been affected by one another, some sort of a domino effect. Rush offense is second in the league at 154, pretty much 155 a game. Third down offense, as you see, we're 27th in the league at 33%. That's not good enough. Again, you're not going to win very many games. We were 1 of 8 on Sunday versus the Falcons. You're not going to win very many games doing that. Total defense, especially with the way we're playing defense right now, you need the offense to sustain itself, stay on the field, and keep this defense off the field as much as possible. Total defense, 24th in the league, 356 yards per game. Scoring defense, 18th in the league at 22, basically 23 points a game. If you would have told me before the season started that we come out of the first month of the season giving up 23 points a game, I would have told you we're at least no worse than 3-1. We're probably 4-0 because of how prolific I thought this offense would be. Now, we're scoring 27 points a game roughly, but that's just because of the outbursts we had against the Raiders. You take that away, and we're somewhere probably middle of the pack to the bottom third of the NFL in scoring offense. So we really haven't been consistent in that regard. But the 27 we put up against the Falcons wasn't a bad number either. Passing defense, we're 27th in the league, 248 yards per game. And again, that spiked because of the 2 losses, right? Jordan Love in week 2. And then, Geno threw for damn near 300 in week 3. And then obviously the 313 yards that was given up in week 4 to Michael Penix Jr. Really, if you don't have the week 1 performance by Russell Wilson, you're probably dead last in the league in pass yards given up. So that's your saving grace right now. Even though the Geno one was empty calories, right? The Geno Smith one wasn't impactful. It still happened. Sacks, you're tied for 11th with 10 sacks on the season. Your rush defense is 14th at 107 yards, 107 yards and a half per game, which I think this is not indicative of what we've done because the quarterback runs have been a big part of this, and it skews this number a little bit. But ultimately, we've been really good against the run. This was not one of our better efforts, even though the number still wasn't over 4 yards a carry. When you totaled everybody's rushes up in the game. Bijan had a really good game. Algier had a good enough game, and it needs to be better. But the silver lining in the Falcons game is that we won't see too many offenses that feature the same type of outside zone rushing attack that they featured, which is a good thing because, again, I think that's one of our Achilles heels is the outside zone and the outside run game in general. Third down defense, tied for 6th. We talked about that the other day at 33%. We're still one of the best teams on third downs. Time possession, we stink right now at 27 minutes and 43 seconds. We're 5th worst in the NFL as currently constructed. Turnover differential, tied for 19th at -1. So we finally get a turnover, but we gave one away. So we didn't get back to the even mark in the turnover differential category. Let's take a look at the ops and what the Chargers have going on. So total offense, they're 8th in the league. So they can definitely move the football with Justin Herbert under center. Scoring offense, we see that this doesn't matter when it comes to us as of right now. We had the Falcons as the 31st scoring defense in football, and we still managed to give up 4 points. So the fact that they're only scoring 22 points a game and they're ranked 20th means absolutely nothing to us. And again, the reason that they're there is because of the last 2 contests when they played 2 of the better defenses in the league in Denver and New York. We are neither one of them. Passing offense, they're 5th in the league at 250. So again, that's a bad omen if you believe in these numbers and the weight of them. Our pass defense stinks. Their pass offense is one of the best in football. It could be a mixture that leads to disaster. Sacks allowed, they're 24th in the league with 12. That's why I feel we have a shot to win this football game, is because of numbers like that. And their offensive line is going to be affected even more so this week with no Joe Alt. Rush offense, 21st in the league. Again, that's another reason why I feel like we can have success. That number was really bolstered by the performance of Amarian Hampton this past week against the Giants. Without that big performance, I venture to say that they're 27th, 28th, 29th in the league rush offense-wise. They haven't been very good. Some of it, too, is those first 2 weeks, they really just told Justin Herbert, go out here and win us the game. The last 2 weeks, they tried to be more balanced, maybe because out of necessity, because they were playing better defenses that weren't going to allow them to throw it as much, and it just hasn't worked for them. But nonetheless, we can stop them up front, I believe. As you see the sacks allowed and you see the rush offense isn't all that great. I think that's where our one area of advantage lies, and we have to take full advantage of it. Third down offense, 5th in the league at 43%. So their strength is our strength. They're great on third down. Offensively, we're great on third downs. Defensively, someone is lying, or someone will be made a liar in this game. Total defense, and this is where you start to figure out that this defense ain't no joke, right? Total defense, 3rd in the league at 270 yards given up per game. Scoring defense, 4th in the league at giving up a very paltry, dental floss thin 17.8 points per game, right? Passing defense, 5th in the league, 158.8 yards per game. So those 3 numbers right there tell the story. Total defense, they don't give up a bunch of yards, 270 a game, 3rd best in the NFL. Scoring defense, they don't give up a bunch of points. You're not lighting up the scoreboard against these boys. 17.8 points a game. They were the number 1 scoring defense in the NFL last year. So this is not a fluke. This is not just them starting the season off that. This is what they do under Jesse Minter. They don't give up a bunch of points. Passing defense, 5th in the league right now. Now, you can talk all the shit you want about Benjamin St. Juste, but he's a part of the 5th best pass defense in football. And that ain't like our shit last year that was phantom. That's a legitimate 158.8 yards per game given up. They play the pass well. They play zone defense. They keep everything in front of them. They don't give up a bunch of explosive plays, unlike us. They tackle. They rally to the football. They play tight zone coverage. They get their hands on the football. Yeah, they do all of that stuff. The sacks, tied for 8th with 12 on the season. No Khalil Mack. I feel a little bit better about that. Rush defense, they're 16th in the NFL in the rush defense department at 111 yards per game given up. So I feel like we can exploit that. Now, a lot of those rush yards, quiet as kept, have come from the quarterbacks. Quarterbacks have hurt them. Mahomes hurt them in the week 1 game. Geno, to a much lesser degree, hurt them in week 2. And last week, They had all kinds of issues with Jackson Dart running the football. So, again, do you want Jaden running the football? I know a lot of you probably don't, but if you want to maximize the offense and our chances to beat the Chargers, you're going to have to add the quarterback in as a runner if you want to maximize what we can do in this game. Third down defense, they're 17th in the league at 38%. So they're not terrible, but they're not great either. But they're hovering right around league average. Time of possession, 15th in the league at 30 minutes, 28 seconds. We're hoping to skew that a little bit. We got to be better in the time of possession department. Hopefully this is the game where we start to turn that around. And then the turnover differential, they forced some turnovers, but as I mentioned, Herbert has been turning the ball over. You saw he had 2 turnovers in the game on Sunday, 2 near pick sixes thrown, one to Drew Phillips, the other to big Dexter Lawrence. He's had 3 interceptions in the last 2 weeks. He also had a fumble against the Denver Broncos. So they've been turning it over a little bit. They haven't been forcing as many turnovers. They started out the season forcing some turnovers, but they've been turning it over a little bit more here of late. So they're -2 in that department. But that doesn't mean they don't force turnovers. So this is a Chargers team that defensively, they're going to pose a real challenge to us. And if we're going to win this game, our offense is going to have to show up. They're going to have to convert third downs. They're going to have to score the football against one of the premier scoring defenses in the league. Jaden is probably going to have to be a part of the run game, whether you like it or you don't like it. And we're going to have to keep the defense off the field, as much as possible. We're going to have to try to win time of possession. And if we can do those things, we're going to give ourselves the best chance to win. But also, when the defense is going to have to see the field regardless. Like, you can't babysit them. And I don't think you have to, especially this game with the compromised nature of the Chargers offensive line. But if you can't take advantage of their offensive line, it's going to be a long day because, as I've mentioned to you guys before, it's going to be tough to stop the combination of Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, Oronde Gadsden II, and all the weapons that they can throw at you offensively, not to mention Amarian Hampton showed the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield last week. So they've got weapons all over the place. You really don't want to get into a war of talent because, as we saw last week, most teams' offensive talent is going to be greater than what we put on the field from a defensive talent standpoint. So we need to get to Justin Herbert. We need to disrupt him. And if we can do some of those things, we're going to have a shot. We'll talk more about that in greater detail tomorrow when we get to our game plan and some of the keys to victory against this Chargers team. But right now, just understand that we're dealing with a defensive juggernaut. This is the best defense we would have seen all year long. You thought the Packers defense was really good? Well, this Chargers defense is damn good now. They don't have the same caliber of pass rush that the Packers had in week 2, but they have the type of defense. Like, the Packers just gave up, 40 to the Cowboys. I don't think you're going to see the Chargers at any point this season give up 40 points to any opponent. I don't give a shit who you are. I don't think they're, unless they would turn it over 4 or 5 times, at a kick block for a touchdown, unless some craziness goes on, you're not going to see this Chargers team surrender that kind of points. So can we do enough is the question. Only one way to find out. But this is a big game for both teams, but it's more of a big game for the Commanders. This feels like the more desperate team is going to win. I feel like the Commanders are the more desperate of the two teams, but that doesn't mean anything if you don't go out and execute. So we'll see what happens. Anyhow, let's get to the comment section real quick. Not a lot here, and then we'll get out of here. CGM87, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. CGM87 writes, Quan Martin has been awful. PFF ranks him 128 out of 129 safeties. I don't disagree with that. He's been one of the most disappointing players for me defensively this year. He was supposed to be the guy making all these plays, taking this massive jump, and I just haven't seen it, right? He said, and has allowed a 20-yard completion and at least 1 missed tackle in the first 4 games. That sounds about right. Did he allow a 20-yard completion in week 1 against the Giants? I don't recall that happening, but he might have given up 1 to the tight end. I think they did have 1 sizable gain to the tight end over the middle of the football field. But like, yeah, Quan Martin, I mean, if the Jaden Reed catch would have counted and not had the holding penalty drawn by Dorrance Armstrong, it'd be even worse for him. He might be 129. He might be dead last, if that play had counted. But nonetheless, he hasn't been what they thought he was going to be. And frankly, in my mind, I've already come to grips with the fact that he won't ever be what Brian Branch is in Detroit. And that's the guy that we should have drafted. That's the guy that said that he thought was going to be drafted by Washington. They told him they were going to draft him, and they had an opportunity to draft him, and they did not. And he's been phenomenal, and Quan Martin has been basic. So it is what it is. Like, again, a lot of these Ron Rivera picks have been what they've been. And, we got to continue to deal with the aftermath and the wreckage that was left by Ronald Eugene Rivera, or was it Edward? I don't remember his name. I don't give a shit. Ultimately, Quan Martin, we got Quan Martin. We got what we got. So got to deal with it. But you're not wrong. And, I don't normally care about what PFF thinks. I don't give a shit. But we've seen it. We've watched it. He hasn't been a difference maker this season. He's always late to the party. He doesn't make plays. The only plays he makes are the ones that come to him. Those are the only plays. We've yet to see him jump some shit. We've yet to see him. He had a pass breakup on Sunday. He did have one of those. That was a good play. But those are so few and far between. So I'm already, in my mind, accustomed to him not really being a true difference maker. So there's that. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, on Commanders Nightly News. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time, tomorrow, when we will go into the game plan, and I'll give you my final outcome for this big-time contest in Week 5 versus the Los Angeles Chargers. We'll look at the final injury report, and we will talk about what we think is going to happen in this game. Until then, I'm your man Louie T, signing off. You guys have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Enjoy Thursday Night Football. Peace.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap. Hand to Riggins. Good hole. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone. The 35, the 30, the 20. He's gone. He's gone. Touchdown.